Howdy, everyone. It's Bradley Stalder, and this is episode 23 of the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. In episode 22, last night, I drafted on Drafters Fantasy a 20-round best ball tournament draft, $20 entry. You can go on to Drafters Fantasy right now and use the promo code BESTBELL for a $20 ticket into this tournament when you first time deposit $20 or more. So check that out. Love working with Drafters Fantasy. And tonight, what I'm going to do is go through ADP round by round. I'm going to identify the biggest riser. I'm going to identify the biggest faller for each round. And actually, there's going to be a couple bonus ones for each round. And these ADPs are drawn from draftersfantasy.com. So this is a full PPR ADP comparison. I'm sure on other sites you'll see similar trends, but for this podcast, this study, I'm going to be going through round by round the biggest riser and biggest faller and offer a little bit of commentary for each of these players. Let's start in the first round. The biggest riser was only by 1.3 spots, and that's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon ended up rising from the 12.4, so just outside the first round, to the 11.1. And I think this has to do with the fall of Davante Adams, who was the biggest faller in round one. I do believe Mixon belongs in that first round, so getting him at that spot is going to be appropriate here. The biggest fallers in the first round, less than one spot. So as I said, in the first round, there's not been a lot of shifting. But once we get outside the first round, we will see some bigger shifts, some bigger changes in ADP from May until June. So the biggest faller in round one, actually there were two of them, Derrick Henry and Davante Adams. Both Adams and Henry fell 0.9 spots, which you think, oh, it's not much. It's about one spot. Derrick Henry fell from the 5.7 to the 6.6. And it seemed that he was being interchanged now with Jamar Chase more readily. So people are more likely to be taking Jamar Chase ahead of Derrick Henry than they were a month ago. Yeah, looking at the rest of it, the entire first round seems pretty set. In round two, though, the biggest riser, Aaron Jones a month ago, and this data was pulled on May 12th. Aaron Jones was being drafted May 12th outside of the second round. He was being drafted at the 24.4. Now he's jumped to the 18.1, and even in a draft last night, I saw him go at the 201. So there's a lot of hype for Aaron Jones, and this may be the spot where you can still be drafting Aaron Jones, but once he gets creeping in to that first round, I'm not in on Aaron Jones anymore. He's still splitting carries and splitting catches with AJ Dillon. So Aaron Jones, I think this is the right spot for him, but any more expensive, I'm going to be out. I was preaching about this, and I'm glad that it's coming to fruition. I've been drafting more and more of him because his price has fallen, is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams has dropped almost half of a round, which is what I predicted about a month ago, that he would need to drop about a half a round for me to start drafting him. Back in May, Javonte Williams was at the 17.7, so he was being drafted at the 205. Now he's being drafted at the 23.5, almost at the 24, near the end of the second round. I've been getting him at the 301, the 302. So you can have a little bit more confidence drafting Javonte Williams now that he's falling into that third round and trending that way. People are wising up. Obviously, Melvin Gordon is back, but it takes time for the market to readjust. And I think that this readjustment period, getting zero Javonte Williams when his price was beginning of the second round, even some people taking him in the first round, that was too expensive. In round three, the biggest riser, Michael Pittman. Back in May, you were able to get Michael Pittman at the 42.2. So the middle of the fourth round. Now He's getting drafted at the 32.8, near the mid third round. Some places as the wide receiver 12. And there's such a significant teardrop. In one of the drafts I just recently did, I took Tyreek Hill over Michael Pittman. And the only other player that I identified in the tier above Michael Pittman was AJ Brown that was on the board. Right now, Michael Pittman is going behind AJ Brown, but I would venture a guess and say that Mike Williams and T. Higgins deserve to be drafted ahead of him at this point. That there's been a lot of hype for Michael Pittman. I'm all for him being a quality player, but he may have made himself too expensive for what you have in the Indianapolis off. I'm probably out on Michael Pittman until his price goes back down, even though, yes, I took him in a drafters season long league at the end of the third round, maybe the fourth round. The biggest faller in round 3, Jalen Waddle. We've talked about it ad nauseum. We know that Miami brought in Tyreek Hill. We expect that the targets to decrease for Jalen Waddle. It's only 3 spots, but we've seen Jalen Waddle since February in the big board drafts go from the 212 to now Jalen Waddle is being drafted at the 35.6. That would be at the end of the third round. So he's lost almost a full round since February. Granted, Tyreek Hill, as we said, is still there, but he's still going to be a pretty significant producer. Not much to say here. Jalen Waddle at the end of the third round. Sometimes you can get him in the fourth round if his value continues to fall. So keep an eye out for that. Love getting fourth round Jalen Waddle. Now, the biggest riser on the fourth round is Ezekiel Elliott. He was getting drafted in the 5th round. If you look back on the YouTube shorts, Ezekiel Elliott was one of my biggest values at the beginning of the 5th round. He was being drafted at the 48.4. Now the market has caught up. He's being drafted at the 38. So beginning of the 4th round instead of the beginning of the 5th round. I think that now this price is fair for Ezekiel Elliott. You're going to get him in the 4th round. He's going to be getting significant amount of carries, probably 2/3 of the carries in this Dallas Cowboys offense that's fast-paced. So I think there's a lot of confidence for drafting Ezekiel Elliott at this spot, but any higher is too much. Patrick Mahomes is the biggest faller in the 4th round. He lost about a half a round. And that's with he's being interchanged with the Cortland Suttons of the world, the Justin Herberts. We've been seeing some Justin Herbert fall, but Mahomes is falling faster right now. So Herbert is dropping. He dropped about 2 spots since May 12th. Patrick Mahomes dropped almost 6 spots. So we'll see if that trend continues, and Patrick Mahomes may become a value if you can get him in the 5th round in drafts. I ended up getting him in the 4th round most recently to do a Travis Kelce stack, but drafting Mahomes at ADP is not going to lose you your league. The biggest riser in round 5, Brandon Cooks jumping up 7.9 spots. Brandon Cooks was being drafted at 65.1, so in the 6th round. Now he's being drafted at the 57.2. I still think that Brandon Cooks is undervalued, being drafted behind Jerry Jeudy, behind Gabriel Davis, behind Allen Robinson, behind even Chris Godwin. Make it make sense for me. I don't understand why Brandon Cooks is being slept on. And he's only 1 spot ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster, 5 ADP spots ahead of Darnell Mooney. I don't understand. Draft Brandon Cooks, round 5, is going to be still one of the most undervalued players for you. The biggest faller in round 5 is Antonio Gibson. And finally, the market is catching up to what I had said in one of my Fantasy Pros articles, that Antonio Gibson's ceiling is taken out by the re-signing of J.D. McKissick, and his floor is chipped away at by the drafting of Brian Robinson, the Alabama prospect, 3rd round draft pick. So it makes sense that his stock is going down. He's dropped 12.3. Back in May, Antonio Gibson was being drafted at ADP 40. Now 52.3. He's still being drafted ahead of Josh Jacobs, but looking at the running backs he's being drafted behind, I'd still take Travis Etienne over Antonio Gibson. I still take Breece Hall over Antonio Gibson at these spots. The biggest round 6 riser is Rashad Bateman, 9.4 spots. The Rashad Bateman hype and love has reached an all-time high. He was ADP 70 back in May, now at 60.6. Almost the end of the 6th round, now the beginning of the 6th round. Rashad Bateman, get it. We know the Marquise Brown is traded. Mark Andrews coming off a career year, but there's no one else to throw to. Devin Duvernay, that's not going to get it done. Rashad Bateman may command a very significant target share, and it will be interesting to see how I project Rashad Bateman and his target share going into 2022. I'm going to start doing projections in about a week. Elijah Moore is the biggest player dropping in round 6. He dropped 10.6 spots. I'm not a fan of that. I am at a value. Elijah Moore is getting drafted behind Michael Thomas, and I like Michael Thomas's value. Michael Thomas also dropped 10.4. But I like Elijah Moore ahead of Darnell Mooney. I like Elijah Moore ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster. So getting Elijah Moore and just allowing his value to plummet, that's great because I have a lot of confidence that Elijah Moore, even with Garrett Wilson there, even with Corey Davis healthy, Elijah Moore is going to be the wide receiver you want in this Jets offense. Round 7, the biggest riser, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 15.4 spots. You were able to draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 87.5. Now you're having to draft him at 72.1. Finally ahead of Miles. He's still ahead of Miles Sanders, but Sanders has jumped as well. We'll talk about him. We actually won't talk about him because Miles Sanders is into the next round. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to be the lead back on the Kansas City Chiefs. There were reports that he was coming back from surgery. I think it was like kidney surgery, and he was battling that all year. He lost a ton of weight, and he coming out of college, he was described as like a bowling ball. He's small, he's roll into people, but he lost a lot of weight. He wasn't as shifty. He was getting knocked down, but now he's gained that weight back. He's healthy. He's recovered from surgery. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we have a reason now to understand why he wasn't doing well last year and was losing significant snaps to Darrell Williams. Round 7, biggest drop, DeAndre Hopkins, most obviously because of the suspension. He's dropped 16 points. His ADP is now 81.6. Anytime after 80, I'm fine taking DeAndre Hopkins, especially if I've got Kyler Murray in a week 17. Round 8, the biggest riser, Christian Kirk, 8.9. So Christian Kirk signs the biggest wide receiver deal that we've seen this offseason in free agency. There are other extensions and trades that have happened, but everyone was surprised about the Christian Kirk signing. And with Trevor Lawrence coming back, we can taking the next step forward. Doug Peterson running a faster offense and a much more competent offense. We could see Christian Kirk take a step forward, like how we had hoped he would do before DeAndre Hopkins got traded to Arizona. The biggest faller in round 8, Damian Harris. And this is the market catching up to the Patriots, drafting 2 running backs. And James White still recovering from the hip injury, but we don't know what's going to happen with Damian Harris this year, whether they're going to run him into the ground or the Patriots are going to continue to have a lot of different backs and be a very frustrating backfield to depend upon. So I think that his fall has mostly to do with that reality. Round 9, one of the biggest risers, Dawson Knox, 14.3 spots. Dawson Knox originally at 115.2, now his ADP is 100.9. Jamison Crowder is there, Isaiah McKenzie is there, Khalil Shakir is there, Gabriel Davis, Stephon Diggs, Christian Kirk, round 8 big riser, but Dawson Knox even bigger because Buffalo didn't add anybody of significance to replace Dawson Knox or to step into another pass catching role. I love Jamison Crowder's value, but no, he's not a touchdown maker in his career. Dawson Knox is that, and Gabriel Davis is that. So it makes sense that with Dawson Knox being tied to the Buffalo offense, his ADP may continue to rise as we get closer to the season. Derek Carr's ADP of 104.5 is actually a pretty significant drop. It dropped 13.1 spots from May to June. I think that's the market cooling on Devontae Adams joining, Darren Waller still being there, on Hunter Renfrow still being there. The reality is Derek Carr is now going to be going, but he's going behind Trey Lance. He's going behind Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, as he should be. But one of the quarterbacks, Derek Carr, is still going ahead of Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins as well. I would take Cousins and Rodgers over Derek Carr. I only drafted Carr recently in a DraftKings draft to stack him with some other Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr is one of those players that he's losing value because the market is cooling. They reacted hotly when Devontae Adams came and the showered narrative and everything, but we're now settling in and seeing that Derek Carr is who he is. And maybe he'll have a spike year, but probably not. Round 10, the biggest riser, Melvin Gordon. We got clarity. He re-signed with Denver. And this correlates pretty well with the Javonte Williams fall. So Melvin Gordon jumps around. And I loved getting Melvin Gordon back in the 11th round. Now he's going in the 9th round, even the 10th, beginning of the 10th round. I will take Melvin Gordon, and I took him, but I'll still continue to take him in these builds. Rondell Moore is the biggest faller. And this is interesting because it's Rondell Moore and DeAndre Hopkins are falling, both Arizona Cardinals. We haven't received any significant news other than AJ Green is back. And maybe AJ Green is a needle mover for Rondell Moore, but probably not. We did see AJ Green's ADP increase a tad, but maybe this is the market cooling once again on Rondell Moore after the DeAndre Hopkins suspension, because there was a lot of love for Moore, and Marquise Brown still increasing his ADP, but Moore is trending downward. Biggest riser, round 11, camp hype, love, Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines was being drafted at 143. Now he's being drafted at 131, a full round earlier. And this is coming out of the camp hype that coaching staff thinks that Nyheim Hines should be on your fantasy team. And spoiler alert, he should not be on your best ball teams. Because if he takes over an important spot for you, let's say Jonathan Taylor is out, if he steps into a significant role in this offense, it's still not going to be a bell cow role, probably not going to be a goal line role for Nyheim Hines, probably going to be another running back. So even though Nyheim Hines has jumped around, I'm not in on that. Michael Carter dropping a round and a half in the last month, 18.3. Now, looking at what happened to Breece Hall also fell 2.4 spots. So the combined ADP drop for these running backs is over 20 spots. The only explainable reason I can think is that the market is reacting finally to Breece Hall is going to be the lead back. Breece Hall is the primary runner for this Jets offense. And that's what the camp hype is confirmed is, yes, Michael Carter will have a significant role, but that's not going to impact Breece Hall in such a significant way. Make Michael Carter more around 8 or around 9 value. That's not going to be in the range of outcomes for Michael Carter as long as Breece Hall is on the field. In rounds 12 and 13, we've seen some rookie running backs increase their value pretty significant, their ADP pretty significantly. Dameon Pierce and Tyler Algier both jumping almost 16 spots, whereas rookie wide receiver Jamison Williams in the 12th round dropped almost a full round. Now we've gotten clarity, and this is where we start to get more information throughout the offseason. The OTAs have revealed to us that Jamison Williams is not going to be ready for the beginning of the year. I thought so, but it takes time for the market to correct there. So Jamison Williams dropping a full round. I'm going to continue to draft Jamison Williams, especially in these week 17 tournaments. Jamison Williams is a consideration. And these full PPR, full season tournaments, Jamison Williams is probably not a target because you're going to lose him for a pretty significant part of the season. So I'm not a fan of taking Jamison Williams in like the drafters tournaments. He's one of my avoids for that one. But Dameon Pierce, Tyler Algier are increasing rounds 12 and 13. The biggest decrease in round 13, Will Fuller. As long as he remains unsigned, his ADP is going to continue to plummet. When he signs, though, that's where we'll see him jump. Round 14, the Podfather himself, I believe, has moved the ADP single-handedly of Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert was a round 16 plus consideration. Now he's being drafted in round 14. Tolbert increasing from May to June 25.1 spots on average on drafters. The biggest faller round 14, Raheem Mostert. Mostert dropping over 22 spots, and this is with the signing of Sony Michel. The market's reacted pretty significantly that Sony Michel is going to get significant carries for Miami, and Raheem Mostert, who's 29 years old, is probably not going to be the answer. We also got clarity that Raheem Mostert may not be ready for week 1. We'll see, but we got clarity that there's still ambiguity with him, if that makes sense. All right, round 15, the biggest riser of all players of ADP, Darrell Williams. Round 15, he was being undrafted in a lot of spots. Williams jumps over 4 rounds, 49.5 spots. He signs in Arizona, and I've talked up Darrell Williams as being one of the running backs I want, especially when I don't draft James Conner. I could imagine going with starting my draft with Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, or Breece Hall, and then getting a sprinkling of 3 or 4 of the following, like Darrell Henderson, Darrell Williams, Isaiah Spiller, Alexander Madison, those types of players. If their lead back goes out, boom, you're in good shape. Darrell Williams is definitely one of those players that you want on your best ball teams. We saw him be a running back too for the Kansas City Chiefs, getting goal line work, getting passes. He could take on a Chase Edmonds role, and that's a significant role. He could be making your flex spots pretty regularly in round 15. One of the biggest fallers, round 15, Ryan Tannehill. Lost over 20 spots of ADP. Now we know Robert Woods he's making his way back, but we don't know if he's going to be full go to start the year, number one. And number two, Treylon Burks. I think this is a reflection of Treylon Burks and the lack of conditioning and the asthma. If you're having concerns about the lead pass catcher of the offense, there's going to be a discount of that quarterback. And Ryan Tannehill, that's a reflection in his ADP. He's lost over 20 spots. Round 16, KJ Hamler. I loved getting Hamler in the 18th round, 17th round, 19th round, even in the 20th round in some places. Hamler has jumped 18.4 spots, so he was going probably round 18 about a month ago. Now, because of the Jerry Jeudy domestic violence concerns and the Jerry Jeudy pulled groin. KJ Hamler came out and said he wants to be Russell Wilson's Tyler Lockett. So I don't know if that's true, if he will be, but Hamler has the second round draft capital of the Broncos. He also is a year removed from his ACL tear and doesn't seem to be having any hiccups. So KJ Hamler in round 16, I think that's a great pick. One of the biggest fallers, round 16 at Kendrick Bourne. You can't have a lot of confidence in Kendrick Bourne now that the New England Patriots went out and got Tyquan Thornton in the draft and they traded for Devontae Parker. Kendrick Bourne is there. Jacoby Myers is there. You still have Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith to rotate in at tight end. There are plenty of pass catching options. And Kendrick Bourne was able to overtake Nelson Aguilar as the touchdown maker and had the spike weeks that we thought Nelson Aguilar would have last year. So with the additions in the wide receiver group, Kendrick Bourne may be, a better pick in the drafters fantasy than the end of the year week 17 picks, but we're already starting to see Kendrick Bourne drop an ADP almost a full round. He was going in round 15 or earlier. Round 17, the biggest riser, Hassan Haskins, has jumped a round and a half. He's getting a lot of praise at OTAs. And with Derrick Henry having 5 screws in his foot, Hassan Haskins fits that role. He's a first and second down thumper out of Michigan. Round 17, the biggest faller, James Washington, 13.4 spots. James Washington is dealing with an injury right now. We were hoping that he would be able to get into that rotation, but instead it's Simi Fehoko because Jalen Tolbert is also dealing with an injury. So James Washington, biggest faller, round 17. Round 18, biggest riser, Tyler Conklin. I haven't heard as reasons why. I've always been a Tyler Conklin guy, though, so go Conklin. Rising from being undrafted mostly to now round 18 consideration for the Jets. Biggest faller, round 18, Zamir White. And I think that there's been some post-draft cooling towards Zamir White. I know that Josh Jacobs has had his 5th-year option declined, and they did cut Jalen Richard, but Kenyon Drake is making his way back, and I think it's going to be Drake Jacobs to start the season. Zamir White, more of a Best Ball Mania 3 consideration or an FFWC consideration where the shootouts matter, the end of the season matters. Zamir White may be more valuable in those type of formats. Round 19, the biggest riser, Bryan Edwards. Bryan Edwards probably going to be the wide receiver 2 for this Falcons team behind Drake London. Edwards jumping 18.2 spots in round 9. So he was going from undrafted to at least people are now taking shots on him. Biggest fallers, round 19, Isaiah McKenzie, Chris Carson, both dropping 16.4. And I want to just put it out here, looking at some of the things that are being said out of Seahawks camp, you can't have confidence drafting Chris Carson anymore. I am done drafting Chris Carson until I hear that he's full go at practice. There are no concerns. He's been medically cleared. All of those, I need those positive vibes. Until then, Chris Carson remains undrafted and on 0% of my teams. Isaiah McKenzie also dropping 16.4 spots, and that's with Jamison Crowder jumping. Crowder did jump 8.4 spots. He's the slot receiver, and Khalil Shakir maintained his ADP. A little cooling on Isaiah McKenzie in his role. Round 20, the biggest riser for the last round, 11 spots. Kyle Phillips now being drafted at the beginning of the 20th round instead of the end of the 12th round. Kyle Phillips now getting run with Tennessee. Robert Woods is hurt, coming off the ACL, and Treylon Burks is dealing with his asthma. Nick Westbrook-Akine is there, and Kyle Phillips is there. Phillips may step into a pretty significant role to start the season. He's an interesting player in season-long tournaments, not just week 17. The biggest faller, round 20, shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. It's Jimmy Garoppolo. He's now mostly being undrafted. There are concerns with the throwing shoulder surgery, him not being on a new team, and the 49ers saying, we might just hang on to him and let Trey Lance start, which would nerf his value completely. Okay, so those were round by round, and then I'm just going to identify the biggest jumps as well. I've mentioned a few of these players in the round by rounds, but maybe they were hidden. Darrell Williams, I mentioned one of the biggest jumps, 49.5 spots. Tyrion Davis Price for San Francisco has jumped 33 spots in ADP. Tyler Conklin, I've mentioned. Jalen Tolbert, I've mentioned. Alec Pierce has dropped 24.3. Let's see here. Miles Sanders has jumped 19 from 92.5 to 73.5. Mark Ingram is now being drafted at the 212th spot. He's jumped 18, a round and a half. And then Jonnu Smith as well. Jonnu Smith showing up to OTAs and talking about how he's in better shape and he's ready to get rolling in this Patriots offense. I'm still hesitant to draft a lot of Jonnu Smith. On the flip side, just to recap some of the biggest fallers, Mitchell Trubisky is now being undrafted in a lot of spots. Malik Willis is being undrafted in a lot of spots. Dan Arnold, undrafted. Raheem Mostert, I've mentioned. Keyshawn Vaughn is now being undrafted. Chuba Hubbard is being undrafted. Ryan Tannehill, I mentioned. Trey Sermon is now undrafted with the rise of Davis Price. Jimmy Garoppolo, I've mentioned. Michael Carter, I've mentioned. And of course, Deshaun Watson has dropped a round and a half in the last month. So that's the round by round biggest risers and fallers, and also a recap of just the overall biggest risers and biggest fallers from May to June. That'll do it for today's pod. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you do wherever you listen to your podcasts. And make sure to check out the Best Bell YouTube channel, where I'll be drafting live throughout the offseason, offering some insights and trends and studies like tonight's throughout the offseason. In about a week, I'll be starting doing projections study halls for each of the teams. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And in the meantime, good luck in the best ball streets.